The FIFA Women's World Cup is happening in Australia and New Zealand right now, but not many people really care about it. In fact, the men's counterpart is way more popular and successful than the women's one for a variety of reasons, and there are many venues that should have hosted it but simply didn't, and today's video is about the top 10-ish best stadiums that should have hosted the World Cup, but didn't for many reasons. Number 10. Stade Auguste-Bennel. The Stade Auguste-Bennel is the stadium French side FC Saint-Montbéliard plays at since 1931. The 1938 World Cup happened at France, and back then, FCSM was surprisingly one of the best teams in France, winning it all the season before the event and winning it some years before. But surprisingly, the stadium wasn't selected for the World Cup, as cities that weren't strong in soccer such as Bordeaux, Le Havre and Toulouse were picked instead. Even the small town of Antibes got to host the World Cup in 1938. It is very surprising that the third edition of the tournament didn't go to Montbéliard, but trust me, it gets worse. Number 9. Dynamo Central Stadium. Both Dynamo Moscow and Spartak Moscow competed to see who would finish building their new stadium first. Spartak Stadium was finished first and this stadium got the rights to host the 2018 World Cup. I understand that Moscow had two World Cup venues in 2018, but I mean, the Dynamo Central Stadium should have been selected too. It would have been a better idea than hosting the World Cup in this hellish Ekaterinburg venue. Number 8. Stadio Independencia of Santiago. I will try to not be biased because the stadium used to be owned by team my maternal grandpa root for, which is CD Universidad Católica. But either way, the Crusaders used to play in the stadium, and the stadium was bigger than the 1962 World Cup venue for America and around the same size as the Rancagua venue, both cities being from Chile if you haven't figured out that yet. Due to an earthquake that happened south of Santiago in 1960, the number of venues for the 1962 World Cup was shortened to only 4, and yet, Stadio Independencia wasn't even considered for the event, which is unfair when you take in consideration that Universidad Católica was the only member of Chile's Big Three that had its own stadium in 1962. Number 7. Arena do Grêmio. The Arena do Grêmio is one of the most modern Latin American stadiums and was built so Grêmio could have a chance to have its stadium hosting the World Cup. Unfortunately, the CBF chose only International's reform Bureau for the 2014 event, and they decided not to have two World Cup venues in Porto Alegre. This stadium got to host the 2019 Copa America, which was won by Brazil itself, and I think that this stadium and Palmeiras Allianz Park should be appointed to host at least one 2030 World Cup match, as I hope Uruguay, Argentina, Paraguay and Chile's big to host it get accepted, but I don't think they have the capacity of creating 15 stadiums from scratch by 2030. Number 6. Düsseldorf Arena. Like the Arena de Grêmio, the Düsseldorf Arena was built to support a Düsseldorf big to host the 2006 World Cup in Germany. This stadium might not be in a German city that is very good in soccer, but there are worse cities that were chosen to host the World Cup, but this didn't happen to the city of Düsseldorf and its brand new modern arena. Fortunately, the stadium hosted the 2011 Eurovision, which was won by Azerbaijan, and will also host the 2024 UEFA Euro. Number 5. Anfield and Elland Road. We can also point out that Anfield and Elland Road, owned by Liverpool and Leeds United respectively, weren't picked for the 1966 World Cup in England. You could argue that the city of Liverpool was represented by Everton's Goodison Park, which is true, but London was represented by two venues and one of them was an extremely obscure stadium that I never heard of before making this video and only hosted a single match, so it would make sense to use the Anfield. But Leeds not being represented despite being of the main English cities in soccer around the time is unforgivable. Number 4. Moranbah. The Moranbah was supposed to be one of the 2014 World Cup venues, but out of nowhere, the Moranbah was cut from the event and Corinthians' bid to create a new stadium for the World Cup got accepted. I wonder why. I do think that Sao Paulo City could have two World Cup venues, as the Moranbah Stadium has some problems and reforming it for the World Cup could have fixed them. At least the Moranbah got the rights to host the 2019 Copa America. Number 3. Munich's Olympiastadion. Yes, I'm aware that Munich was represented by the Allianz Arena, which is definitely of the best stage to ever exist, and I am also aware that Munich's Olympiastadion was pretty outdated back in 2006, and still is, but this stadium was the venue of the 1974 World Cup final. It is a shame that there wasn't any effort to rebuild it as a second Munich venue. This would have been great to both the existence one of the most important German stages ever and it would have been great to 1860 Munich too, as they wouldn't need to play at Bayern Munich's own arena. Number 2. La Bombonera and Dobbelweiser. Argentina's three most iconic soccer stadiums are the Monumental Núñez, home of River Plate, La Bombonera, home of Boca Juniors, and Dobbelweiser, home of Independiente. The problem is that both Boca and Independiente stadiums didn't host a single game at the 1978 World Cup. Instead, cities less important to Argentine soccer such as Mar del Plata and Mendoza were choosing to host the World Cup. It's a damn shame that there was never a World Cup game, particularly in La Bombonera. The atmosphere would have been incredible. Maybe in 2030 this will happen. Honorable mentions. I wanted to include the Pacaembu and Allianz Park in this list, but I don't think Sao Paulo City could or should have 4 World Cup stadia, and plus, I thought the Allianz Park was finished before the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, but it turns out it wasn't, and 2 WC venues in the same city are probably enough, unless if its country does something like this, so I removed the Pacaembu from the list. Bremen's Stadion and Mönchengladbach's Borussia Park could have been on this list too, but I think 12 WC venues for a country around the same size of US state New Mexico is enough. I think Qatar hosting the World Cup all by itself was too much of a bargain. I think it should have borrowed some venues from Saudi Arabia, UAE or maybe Bahrain too, but I don't think this really fits the list. The 2026 World Cup will be in North America. I find it upsetting that Montreal's Olympic Stadium couldn't be reformed. CF Montreal games there have a pretty cool atmosphere for a Canadian soccer club. I also find it shocking that Chicago won't host the 2026 WC, but to be fair, Chicago Fire plays in the Soldier Field. The NFL Chicago Bears are more likely to relocate than reforming their stadium. With that being said, let's talk about our top spot. Number 1, Tokyo National Stadium. Only one country that has hosted the World Cup didn't host games on its own capital. It was Japan in 2002. Japan's national stadium has been its country's most iconic stadium for all of its existence, and yet, no World Cup games in 2002 were there, as Japan decided to build more stadiums in other cities, even those that are completely irrelevant in the Japanese soccer scene. Do you realize how stupid was that? Imagine if Brazil was supposed to host the World Cup again and they left the Maracanã out of it, or if UK were to host this event and Wembley was left out of it, this entry for sure gets the first place. Fortunately, the stadium was reformed to the 2020 Summer Olympics that happened in 2021 due to COVID-19, and the new version of the arena was the main venue of the event. Either way, thank you for watching.